Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for attending CMB's exclusive webinar today. Uh, my name is Prachi Shah, and I am the Senior Investor Relations Manager at CMB Regional Centers. I basically have been working with CMB since past 5 years now, and I have had the opportunity from working from United States as well as India. So I have those in-ground experience helping clients to pursue EB-5 visa. I would also like to give a very warm welcome to our guest speaker today, Ms. Rani Imandi, who is the founder of the Imandi Law Firm based in New York City. Ms. Imandi is a seasoned experience, having 25 years of experience in business immigration law. And Rani, a very warm welcome. How are you doing today?
Prachi, it's a pleasure to be part of your webinar to educate your attendees in regards to the EB-5 immigrant visa. So thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be here to provide some insight and information to many individuals who might have some concerns and questions about how to get a green card in the United States.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Currently, as you can see, all the attendees are muted. If you have any questions, please go ahead and write your questions in the Q&A tab shown here on the screen. We plan to take all these questions post our presentation. So regarding today's agenda, what Rani and I plan to do is that we'll try to cover what's EB5, what are the important steps if one is planning to pursue EB5, why is it extremely important to have an immigration attorney when you're planning to file EB5? And towards the end of the presentation, we will also try to cover a little bit on Biden's administration policy on EB5. Before we even get into EB5, I would say that normally a green card can be obtained either through employment in the United States or by making an investment. And before we involve ourselves into EB5, Rani, what are these employment categories? Like, could you briefly explain them before you get into EB5 explanation?
Yes, absolutely. Well, so let me break it down into the following, because I think this is the goal of the webinar today, which is to provide the attendees information about which is the quicker route to a green card. At the end of the day, everybody wants to have some peace of mind that they've received a green card in the United States, so they don't have some sort of temporary stay in the country. So in order to, so what we have that we're going to discuss today is we're going to talk about the employment-based green card, which is the traditional route to a green card when you have an employer sponsoring you. However, if you have capital that you can invest in the United States, then you have a second route to a green card. So the first route through employment, the employment-based green card, has approximately four categories in order to receive a green card. That's the EB1, EB2, EB3, or EB4 visa, immigrant visa. And most professionals fall under the first three categories, as I've added. That would be EB1, EB2, and EB3. Now, the whole point is that let's talk about the processing times, and that's what's going to be of interest to everybody. The employment-based green cards for nationals for all other countries are typically current, with the exception of China. India has the highest backlog for these green cards, for employment-based green cards, in all the respective categories of EB1, EB2, or EB3. Now, most professionals fall into the EB2 or EB3 category, and EB1 is somebody with exceptional ability in a specific specialized field, and that would fall for professors or scientists or somebody of national who have extraordinary ability in the United States, and they can actually receive a green card by the EB1. The EB2 and EB3 categories are reserved for individuals who have degrees or experience. The EB2 category for is for advanced degree professionals, and the EB3 category, that means a master's degree or higher, whereas the EB3 category is for a professional with a bachelor's degree and 2 years of experience, or just experience of 2 years. So the problem with these categories for anybody is everyone knows there's a backlog. For EB2 nationals, for Indian nationals, the backlog is 11 years. For EB3, it's 10 years for them to get a green card. For Chinese nationals, the EB2 category backlog is about 4 years. And for EB3, it's 2 years. Most other countries do not have a backlog. And what that means is that there are a greater number of green card applications from individuals from these countries. And furthermore, the other countries that have backlogs have been in the past: China, India, Mexico, Philippines, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Vietnam. Now, the reason we mentioned this visa bulletin, as Prachi rightly indicated, is that the employment-based green cards have such backlogs for actually only, as we said, Chinese and Indian nationals right now. But that's about 11 years to 10 years. So for Indian nationals, and Chinese nationals, again, 4 to 2 years. Now, the benefit of when we talk about now that we are spending the majority of this webinar about the EB-5 immigrant visa, the benefit in terms of the timeline for the EB-5 immigrant visa is that you could technically get a green card through the EB-5 visa. If you are an primarily actually Indian national, it can take the temporary green card can be achieved within three to 4 year period, actually as early as 2.5 years, and sometimes up to 4.5 years. And the permanent green card can take another 3 to 4 years after that. So you're looking at a temporary green card within up to as early as 3 years, and a permanent green card within up to 8 years. So that's the first important point that we wanted to bring up, is the timeline and this information.
Right. So now that we discussed the timeline, could you explain, like, what does one need to do when they're planning to pursue EB-5? Like, what are the requirements for EB-5?
Well, okay, so first I just wanted to brush upon the basis and how the EB-5 investment was created. It was created by Congress in 1990 to stimulate the US economy through job creation and capital investment by foreign investors. And this visa has attracted billions of dollars to the US economy, creating tens of thousands of jobs. Now, if basically in terms of, can you redirect me with the question you asked specifically?
So what are the major requirements for EB-5? Like, what does one need to fulfill to get the green card?
Sure. Well, under this program, the individual must be able to have the respective capital, and with that capital, create 10 jobs, permanent jobs, for US workers in the United States. And basically, under this program, investors are eligible to apply for a green card after they have acquired a certain amount of capital. That capital investment ranges from a minimum of $900,000 and can be as high as $1.8 million. And that all depends on where the investment is. The investment has to be made into a new commercial enterprise. And the new commercial enterprise, if it is located in a targeted employment area, that is where the amount can be much less, which could be the 900,000. And the 900,000 relates to when it's in a targeted employment area, the area is an area whereby it has 150% of the national unemployment rate. And hence you're trying to stimulate the capital and the investment in that particular area, or a rural population of having 20,000 people or residents. And that's what a target employment area is. So if you are able to develop and create an enterprise in this area, then the capital account amount is only $900,000 as to $1.8 million.
Right. Okay, so are there any requirements when it comes to like, does one need to have like a particular educational background, or do they need to know particular language since they're planning to come to United States when they're applying for EB-5?
There is no respective requirement in relation to education or language. The important aspect of being a part of being an investor to be eligible to receive the green card is to have at least the capital and create the jobs. But because what we see is that the new commercial enterprise, there are two different routes to proceed with the investment for an EB-5 immigrant visa. One would be through a direct corporate, through a direct commercial enterprise, whereby the individual would invest that capital into an organization and an entity that could be a partnership or a C Corp, having a partner. But that business enterprise needs to have at least create 10 jobs. And hence, not only that, the individual must manage this organization and be a manager and actively manage it. So that's called an active management with a direct commercial enterprise. However, the alternate vehicle to also invest your capital would be through a regional center. And a regional center has been created by Congress and has been certified as such to specifically create and promote economic growth. And the benefit of a regional center now is that with the regional center, instead of having to create, there's two things. One is it's a passive manner of contributing your capital. And through the regional center, one does not have to manage it because the regional center has already been certified to, with the project, with all the financials, with business growth and economic plans. It's been certified to, it actually received certification from the USCIS that has met certain requirements. And hence, when they invest that much money, this is really taken up and managed by the regional center.
Right.
And the benefit of having a regional center further is that you don't have to create the 10-year jobs. Rather, they can accept jobs that are indirect jobs, which means that since you have to meet the requirement of capital, and the second is create the 10 jobs. Indirect job creation is whereby there are other jobs. For instance, if one of the goals of regional centers create an apartment building with a shopping center on the bottom, the fact is that as long as it's created that particular entity, other jobs that are nearby that include even a 7-Eleven that has opened up next door, and those jobs created, many other jobs are added to this. They do not have to be directly through the creation of the regional center, and hence these are indirect jobs. So that's the benefit in that relation, in that you can be a passive investor and all the work is done for the investor.
Right. Okay. Now that's a very good explanation on EB-5. Thank you, Rani. Moving on to next slide, what we see right now is the visa bulletin. And you just mentioned earlier about the backlogs and about the visa bulletin. For our attendees, would you briefly walk us through like how would one study this bulletin, especially with all the employment-based categories?
Right. In terms of the visa bulletin, every year 140,000 employment visas are issued to all the different visa categories. And that means that we are talking 1 through 4, and the EB-5 Regional Center receives 7% of the total visas created. And that means that they get approximately 10,000 immigrant visas per year to be issued for all the EB-5 immigrant visas. And then every country is allotted approximately 7%, again, of that particular 10,000 visas. So what happens is, first, I wanted to talk about the category. It's the fifth category, and that's for the EB-5 immigrant visa. And you have two different categories there. You have the non-regional center and you have the regional center. And right now, if we look at everywhere across the board, everyone's current with the exception of China or Vietnam. So luckily, you know, for Indian nationals, that means that when you do file an immigrant petition and it's approved 3 years from now, 2.5, 3, 4 years from now, that means at this moment in time, you can file for adjustment of status. That means you can apply for the second stage of that green card, which we're going to get into detail. And, you know, you should receive your green card within a year or less after filing, a year to year and a half after filing. Now, non-regional centers relate to an economic enterprise, a commercial enterprise that is not a regional center, that is a business that has been created and managed and invested into by the investor. Whereas the regional center relates to the regional center, clearly, that's their timeline. So China has a backlog equally for both. Vietnam has a backlog equally for both from 2017. So unfortunately for China, mainland China, that is, there you have a 5-year backlog. In terms of the EB1, 2, and 3 categories, as we discussed for Indian nationals and Chinese nationals, that's where we have a higher backlog. That means that, for instance, if we look at India, category number 2, October 2009 is the date of the type of case with the priority date that is being processed currently. So when you file, so now that means that if you file today, you're expecting that much of you have to count the time between 2009 and 2020 to figure out how many years you have to wait. So that's an example of the waiting period.
Right. So when I'm looking at the bulletin, and as you said, the non-regional center and the regional center, is there an advantage if one files via a non-regional center or via a regional center? Because as we can see, India is current, Mexico is current, then why would one choose to file EB5 with a regional center, or why would one choose to go ahead with a non-regional center EB5?
Right. So that is based on the fact that the investor has a bit of a less of a risk to some extent when they are relying upon a non-regional, relying upon a regional center, because a regional center essentially is an organization that has been created with many professional statistics that support the viability and the goal of that regional center. And a regional center can be anything from, it's an entity that invests to create these jobs. And these jobs, when a regional center creates a project, they take X number of investors. It's not just one investor, because their capital requirement, they have large plans, like it could be a shopping center, a hotel, it could be a mixed-use building, a residential complex, and hence those are large products into the multi-millions, into possibly a few hundred million, 60, 50 to 100 million or more. And in order to even enter into such projects, you have to have a very solid contractor or investors who initiated the project. So you have you've got a bank, the lending entity, who has to provide the loans, to say that they will have provided the loans after agreeing that this is a concrete plan. So the benefit of a regional center is that there's been a lot of groundwork that has been prepared and laid down for the individual investor. And moreover, when a regional center has had a track record of granting those green cards, means that they have a history of capital by investors, whereby the investors have actually received their temporary green cards and permanent green cards. That's when you've got a bit of a peace of mind, and you have a higher likelihood of success in your green card journey. And so again, it's a combination of less work, somewhat less risk, and if it's a regional center with a good track record, and also all the items have been met. You don't have to worry about the job criterion. That has already been attested to by the regional center. So there is a bit less work to be done, essentially, with a regional center versus a direct new commercial enterprise where you have to actually manage it ensure that you, with a new commercial enterprise, the individual has to actually ensure this entity can be profitable and support 10 permanent jobs over 2+ years. So this is why it's a little bit, it's an uphill challenge for the commercial enterprise, which is not a regional center.
I think that's a fantastic detailed explanation. Thank you, Rani. Moving forward, now as Rani mentioned, and as she explained the difference between a regional center and a non-regional center EB5, let me introduce you today to CMB Regional Centers. CMB basically stands for California Military Base or Close Military Base. It was one of our very first project back in 1997, wherein our founder, Mr. Patrick Hogan, decided to name the company as CMB Regional Centers. So we have been into this industry from past 23 years, and we have assisted more than 5,700 families from 102 countries to pursue EB5. And out of those 5,700, we have over 4,900 who have already received I-5 to 6 approvals, and over 1,500 have already received I-8 to 9 approvals. Now, I know that you're seeing I-5 to 6 approvals, I-8 to 9 approvals, but we are going to discuss the timeline later in the presentation today. Even all the numbers you're right now looking at your screen, we get audited by an independent third party. So we basically believe in transparency. Our goal is to make sure our clients get the green card. We want to take care of our client, because if we take care of our client, that's when things fall into place. So our motto is to just take care of our clients and be as transparent as possible. As a regional center, as a company, we are basically consisting of 50+ staff members who speak more than 15 languages. I myself speak English, Hindi, Gujarati, and a little bit of Marathi as well. And we also have our in-house project team, our set of economists, and a legal team for compliance as well. If one is choosing to pursue EB5 via a regional center, as Rani mentioned, it can be either into a targeted employment area by investing $900,000, or it can be into a non-TEA area by investing $1.8 million. But apart from this investment, one will have associated costs such as regional center fees, or maybe attorney fees, or even application filing fees. Today, I would like to also discuss the current project which we have opened for subscription for EB5, which is CMB Group 75. We are basically building a build-to-suit warehouse, a logistic facility in Detroit, Michigan. And for this particular project, CMB has collaborated with the developer Hillwood. Hillwood Development, founded by Ross Perot Jr. in 1988, is one of the top 10 real estate developers in the United States. And they are basically known for their high-profile public-private ventures. And if we even talk about CMB and Hillwood's collaboration, we have a long track record of success. We have collaborated with them in about 31 CMB partnerships, CMB projects. And out of those 31 projects, we have had about 25 projects which have already received I-5 to 6 approvals. About 7 of them have already received I-8 to 9 approvals. And about 14 of them is where Hillwood has also done the loan repayment for that particular EB5 loan. Talking about CMB Group 75, as I said, it's a build-to-suit logistic facility which is getting built for one of the Fortune 500 e-commerce, and the construction site is in Wayne County, Michigan. The total capital spending is about $88 million, and we are gathering the EB5 loan is going to be about $26 million. The best part about this project, or the key feature I would say, is the job generation. We are claiming more than over 500 jobs for this particular project. So as you can see, per investor will be able to claim over 17 jobs. So that's the best thing, because that's way higher than the legal threshold of 10 jobs, as explained earlier. To briefly explain about our loan model, or the business model which we have, it's very simple. It's a CMB affiliate which creates a new commercial enterprise. It's a CMB limited partnership, which consists of the general partner and the limited partners. every investor who chooses to invest in that particular limited partnership will be treated as a limited partner. And this new commercial enterprise, the limited partnership, is basically going to execute a loan agreement with the project developer, the borrower, the job creating entity where your jobs are going to get generated in that project. The loan term is basically for 6 years, and at the maturity of the loan agreement is where we can expect the repayment of EB5 loan. Now, the limited partnership is going to describe the duties and responsibilities, the rights and responsibilities as well of the general partner and the limited partner. And the loan agreement is more likely going to cover the collaterals which will mitigate your risk of investment into that particular project. Now, once a particular applicant decides that, I'm ready to pursue EB5, what are the next steps? Once I file the application, what I need to do. But one has to remember that before filing the application, hiring or retaining an immigration attorney is extremely important, not only because they are going to file for your application, but also because they are going to conduct their due diligence on your source of funding. Rani, would you walk us through all the steps when one decides to pursue EB5? Like, what are the steps, as well as, from the immigration aspect of it?
Yes, absolutely. In terms of the steps for the EB5, the first aspect is to file the I-526 petition. And that is the petition by alien investor. The filing fee is approximately $3,675. And that's where the individual must provide that show that he or she meets the requirements for EB5 classification, which includes, number one, that the minimum capital requirement has been met, and that might be the 900,000 or it could be the 1.8 million, and it has to be derived from a legitimate source, and moreover, that there is a legitimate business plan that the investment will have been invested in a certified regional center. So this I-526 petition addresses the source of funds and the actual project being invested in. Certain projects that certain regional centers have already have that certification, have been deemed approved. However, USCIS will ensure and approve the I-526 only after they have verified that the investor's capital has been carefully invested, and number two, the capital is derived from a legitimate source, which is the source of funds criterion, and that the commercial enterprise is legitimate. So that is the initial filing requirement, which is the I-526 petition. In order to, the documentation consisting of an I-526 petition can be as large as like a three foot high set of documents, and that's what we're talking about, because for each regional center normally that's supplied, you're talking about numerous pages, voluminous pages, and evidence about the individuals, also their passport and whatnot, in addition to the criterion to establish the lawful source of funds. And finally, after the approval, the I-526 petition, as we stated, can take up to, as early as we've seen, 27 months, but it can go longer. It can go into 27 months is approximately a little over 2.5 years or so. And it can take as long as 3.5 to 4 years as well, which we've not seen so far. Right now, we're seeing it earlier side. Once the I-526 petition is approved and certified by the USCIS, the individual receives a temporary green card, which is valid for 2 years. And that's a permanent resident card, which allows the individual to work in the United States and travel as he or she pleases. The individual's spouse and children under the age of 21 will also receive permanent resident cards as well. And prior to the expiration of the temporary resident card, the individual must file an I-829 removal of temporary condition petition within 90 days, the 90-day period prior to the expiration of the 2-year card. And that again involves quite a bit of documentation similar to the initial set, but to demonstrate that the job requirement is maintained of the 10 jobs, and that the source continues to remain legitimate. And that I-829 petition is taking anywhere from 3 to 5 years from now, from the time of filing. So those are the two steps in relation, and after that is approved, that's when one receives the permanent green card. So it has the two steps related to it. Yes, and let me know if there's other questions you have about that.
Sure. So I do have a question on the timelines. Now, I want to let the attendees know that the timeline, as Rani mentioned, or as you can see on the screen, your applications are going to get adjudicated by USCIS. So USCIS is the one providing such timelines. But Rani, when I see the I-526 timelines or the I-829 processing time, look at these months. They're like more than 2 years, 3 years, wherein in reality, what are your thoughts? Like, do the applications actually take 2 to 3 years for I-526 or I-829, or what do you see right now?
Well, okay, so according to the current processing times on the USCIS website, that indicates it's 36 months to 65 months for the I-526. We have been seeing 2.5 years at the early stage. Really, it's around 2.5. It's around 2.5 years on average. That's what we are seeing. I know that sometimes maybe for Chinese nationals, it could be a little longer, but for Indian nationals and other country nationals, I've seen closer, under 3 years, shall I say, for the I-526. So you're talking about receiving a temporary green card within under 3 years.
Right. Okay, and then what would you say about the I-829? Do we actually see like 2 to 3 years of wait time or more than that? Or as it says, 27 to 51 months?
Yes, you are seeing around, again, 2.5 years, maybe to 2.5 to 3.5 years on that timeline, even though it says 51 months. I haven't seen the longer timeline just yet. I've seen more of the middle, the lower end to the middle on that timeline.
So then it makes me question, so that that particular investor is going to be on a temporary green card, and when they file for I-829, they might have to wait for 2 years. During that 2 years, what happens to that green card? Does it get extended, or what happens to that particular national? Do they have to go back to the home country?
No. Okay. So with the I-526, that they continue to be extended in the United States. Once they receive the receipt notice from the I-829, they can continue to stay here until they receive their permanent green card. That would allow them to continue to stay here, yes, and work and travel.
All right, so this sounds great. I mean, at least even if they have to wait, but they still do have that green card, which gets extended.
That is correct.
Right, okay.
That is correct.
So what are your thoughts now that Biden is there? The government has changed. What are your thoughts on the administration policy when it comes to EB-5?
While Biden has not specifically indicated a specific stance on the EB-5 visa, he has historically voted in the past to support the EB-5 visa. Moreover, he has a very embracing view towards immigration in general. That is reflected by his most recent executive orders. And he's passed, I think, 9 of them since he's come to office. And each of them have either immediately put a pause on the restrictionist orders or policies of the prior Trump administration, or he has actually eliminated certain restrictionist policies. For instance, the H-4 EAD. He just put a halt on it and said, nope, we're not going to stop that H-4 EAD termination rule. We're revoking it. So his stance and view towards immigration has absolutely been, he has embraced immigration to some extent, and he welcomes it. So we do believe that his and he's planning to reform the entire system. But I think it would always be to the positive side of welcoming immigration as opposed to trying to curtail it in any way.
Right, right. Well, thank you, Rani. Like, I think that covers a lot of things today. So we have ended our presentation, and if our attendees have any questions, I would request you to write all your questions in the Q&A, and we will answer them one by one. I think I'll just give a few minutes for everyone to write in any questions. Okay, so we have a question for you, Rani. What is the timeline for Canadians?
Okay, so Canadians, any country that is not mentioned on the visa bulletin in terms of a visa backlog means that when they file their I-526, they would have, similar to what you have shown on this particular screen, that's the range for the I-526 petition, as well as the I-829 petition. The visa bulletin that we brought up on the screen earlier relates to countries that have the highest number of applicants. So Canadian nationals have not had any backlog and such. That means once you file the I-526 petition, it'll be approved within a reasonable time as per the USCIS website timing, and then they can file the I-829 petition. They don't have to wait. As we saw, there's a current backlog for nationals from mainland China only at this time.
Okay. Well, I hope that answers your question. There's one more. Yeah, so somebody's asking thoughts on the June 30th reauthorization of the EB-5 program. What will happen?
Well, certainly what's surprising is that President Trump has actually extended back in December, extended the program till June. And if President Trump was more restrictionist or had more of a critical policy towards immigration and he extended it, certainly President Biden, with more of an approval or welcoming policy towards immigration, would certainly extend EB-5 as opposed to try to eliminate it. So we do expect the continuation of that policy.
Okay, that's good. We have one more. So can you enter the United States with an EB-2 and then apply for an EB-5?
We do that all the time. The question is, when you say enter with an EB-2, when you enter with an EB-2, that means you already have a green card. So I think the person means that maybe they're on a work visa and they're filing for an EB-2 green card. And can they also file for an EB-5 green card? Well, the answer is yes, and we do it all the time, because what's happened is some nationals don't want to, if they have a backlog, if you're an Indian national, you have a backlog of 10 to 11 years. So some of them, some Indian nationals went ahead while having an EB-2 green card pending. They've also filed for the EB-5. And we do that all the time. A good portion of our clients tend to be individuals with pending green cards, and they're just frustrated with the backlogs because they don't know when they will be cleared, when they have an immigrant petition from the EB-2 or EB-3 category pending.
Right. So while we wait for a few more questions, there were questions which had already come in. So I'm going to ask you the immigration related questions. So there was a question which came in, said that, is there any tax to be paid on the EB-5 investment once it's made?
Well, I think the normal tax, it's not about once it's made. When you make a profit, or you have either, if you've made the income through your W-2, and there are some individuals who do have a substantial portion from their W-2s, they've already paid a certain amount of taxes, and they would pay their taxes anyways to the federal government accordingly, based on having received that income. So if they've sold a business and received and used some of those funds from that business, they have to pay taxes on that income. So once they invest it in here, I think that I think they would check your accountant, but I don't believe that there's any additional tax than what you've already paid, because when you invest in an EB5, and maybe this is something you want to bring up, when the individual invests like $900,000 in the regional center, is there any percentage of return they receive?
They do. Sometimes they do.
Yeah, so depending on sometimes there might be something slight, and then any additional interest they receive, maybe they're going to pay tax on that. That's about it.
All right, understood. The next question we have is that there's someone saying that I have a son who will be turning 21 this November. Why does he age out if he's still a dependent? Like, can he qualify for the relative category?
So a child who's under 21 at the time that the I-526 petition is filed will be able to subtract the period of time the I-526 is pending. That means, so say the child is 20, and then at the time of the I-526 pending and establishing the priority date based on the date that the petition is filed, if it takes 3 years for the green card to be, the immigrant petition to be approved, and by that time the child becomes 23, they can subtract the period of time based on under the Child Status Protection Act. It allows the individual to subtract the time the immigrant petition is pending, which would be that 3-year period. And hence, at the time the parents are eligible to file for adjustment of status, the child would have been deemed only 20 at the time of filing, and hence the child can file for adjustment of status at that time. And it doesn't matter if the 485 is pending for a longer period. Their age freezes at the time the date becomes current to file for adjustment of status. So if there's no visa backlog, then everyone's fine. That means that if there's no backlog to file the I-829 petition based on the visa bulletin, that individual can immediately file the I-829 and use a date based on the time of initially filing the I-526 petition.
Okay.
So they're good. So the individual will be safe.
Yeah, sure. So there's one more. Will I qualify for EB5 if I have a past criminal record in my home country?
Well, there are questions as to whether the individual has committed certain crimes, especially with the adjustment of status. And they do look for some sort of answers of yes or no. They do only run, USCIS will only run status checks on fingerprints in the United States. So the crimes committed in the United States certainly are a problem. If they are elevated to the level of a crime, certainly traffic violations and even sometimes misdemeanors related to shoplifting or things like that, they are not counted towards to preventing the green card from being issued. Right. And yeah, so primarily the answer would be probably no. If if you attest to the fact that you haven't committed a crime, I think you're fine. But whether you're going to admit to a crime, you'd have to be. It's up to the individual themselves. But from foreign countries, there's no fingerprint check there.
Okay.
On a foreign country.
Understood. So there's one more over here who's saying that I'm an Australian citizen. I don't have any business experience in Australia. What are my options? That is EB2 or EB5? Which one would be easier to green card path? And what can I do to migrate via business path? So I believe what this person is trying to ask is that EB2 versus EB5, what will be easier for him to get a green card?
So there are two factors that impact that decision. Number one is really capital. If you have capital and if you can raise that capital, and you can actually, and I'm glad about this person brought this question. I had meant to mention this important aspect of the capital investment amount. If we're talking about an amount of $900,000, you can also receive gifts from family members to meet that amount of $900,000. So, and that to multiple family members. And we have that happen all the time because 900,000, or back then it was 500,000 just a couple of years ago. Even then, you know, you have a mother, your father, uncle, brother lending you that extra capital to meet that requirement. Now, that would be the first distinction is you would probably, actually, there is no wait for Australian citizens for any backlog at this time. So an EB2 green card, if your employer offers you such a green card, is actually a quicker route for you because you don't have a backlog. So I don't see, you know, and the EB5 might be a little longer for such a person. So the EB5, as we know, can take 3 years plus the extra 3 years, or 2.5 plus. So it could be anywhere from 5 to 8 years to receive your permanent green card. Whereas for nationals from other countries, except for the ones we mentioned, China, India, and Vietnam, and some of the other countries, they're the ones who have a bit of a backlog and may be more inclined to seek the EB5 investment immigrant visa.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think this next question is something which I can take forward. It says, when do you receive a return of your investment? So as I explained earlier, normally regional centers, especially those who have a loan model, will have a loan term. And for our business model has a loan term for 6 years. So most likely at the maturity of the loan agreement, once the EB5 loan is repaid, that's when one can expect the return of investment. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind, where are you in terms of your immigration timeline? If you haven't received that green card, if you're still waiting for that green card, let's just assume you're from China, and within that 6 years, as Rani explained, there's a long wait. So most likely you're not going to get a green card in those 5 or 6 years. Then you might get your return of investment a little late. So it really depends on your immigration timeline as well as, you know, the loan term. So if it goes parallelly, that's when you can expect a repayment. But if something, the immigration timeline is up or down, it really depends on these two terms. I think we are running out of time, so we are just going to take one last question today, which is this particular attendee is saying that I am recently divorced and have shared custody with my ex. Do all my children need to live with me in the US in order for them to obtain their green card as well?
No, absolutely not. If you have a child, no matter where in the world the child is, they will be eligible to receive the immigrant visa and the permanent resident, the temporary green card and the permanent green card along with you. The way that it works is the I-526 petition will be filed if you're in the United States, and if it's approved and you're here on another visa, your child abroad will appear for, you might receive your temporary green card here in the United States, but your child will receive will have to attend a visa interview and appear for consular processing abroad. So he or she will ultimately receive the green card. It will just be through a different process.
Understood. Okay. That will be all for today. Thank you so much, Rani, for answering the questions. Thank you to all the attendees who attended the webinar today. We have several questions, but we are running out of time. So what I've done is I have shared my as well as Rani's contact information. If feel free to reach out to us and, you know, consult with Rani or I for all the questions you have, and we will be happy to guide you further from here. So that's the end of our webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Rani, for your precious time. I think you explained EB5. You walked us through so well through the immigration timeline. I will put this slide as it is for a few minutes for anyone who wants to take our contact information. And thank you once again. I believe, yes, we have recorded this webinar, so it should be available for you to watch again at your ease on our YouTube channel of CMB Regional Centers. Thank you all. Thank you, Rani. Have a good
Thank you,
evening.
Prachi. All right. Goodbye to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.